Okay, so welcome to this month's edition of What's New and What We're Reading. And in advance of Valentine's Day, we are looking at romance reads. So when we talk about romance, there's something that we have to talk about along with it, and that is sensuality ratings. This is basically how steamy the romance is. So I've provided a guide. This is from the website All About Romance, which came up with this particular rating system to begin with. And it's just to give the reader an idea of how much heat there is in a particular title. Some people quite enjoy that. Some people want kisses only. This is simply a guide to help you understand what you're going to see in the pages. I will add that level 4 hot is, I would say, what is fairly typical for most romances today. It basically just means there is a sex scene and it is described in detail. That's what it comes down to. Um, Burning is what is referred to as romantica, so that is very, very steamy. The levels below that are generally pretty tame. Okay, so I wanted to talk about what I'm currently reading. Next slide, please. Which is You Should Smile More by Anastasia Ryan. This is, as you can see, one flame. This is very tame. It's kind of, I would call it the borderline between romance and chick lit. Um, a lot of this focuses on the female lead's personal journey, but there is a very heavy dollop of romance in it. Um, I would describe this as The Office meets 9 to 5. It is a hilarious novel of workplace fraud, kittens, romance, and revenge. The main character, who is a telemarketer with a Latin studies degree, is fired because her boss decides he doesn't like her face. She has apparently a nasty resting bitch face, and he fires her only for that and gives her 3 days worth of severance. Um, he fires a couple of her friends at the same time, and they decide there's something fishy going on at this place of business, and they're going to look into it and maybe get a little bit of revenge on the side. The romantic interest is actually her unemployment officer, who is the one who first twigs her to the fact that being fired for resting bitch face is not a thing. That she really needs to look into what's going on in this company. Her boss is exactly the kind of boss you love to hate. He walks barefoot around the office and says that he keeps a patch of grass under his desk so that he can touch grass and stay in touch with the earth, except the grass is astroturf. So this is the kind of person that he is. He terminates her on account of her face, which he says reflects her dark soul, even though he's only spoken with her about twice since she started working at that company. So I am greatly enjoying it. I can't wait to see him get his comeuppance. So first, I'm going to talk about contemporary romances. So these are all present day set. The first one is Shipwrecked by Olivia Dade. This is book 3 and the final entry in her spoiler alert series, which follows a group of actors who all work on the long running show Gods of the Gates. Think Game of Thrones, but with Roman gods instead. It's a similarly themed show with that kind of popularity. And in the story world, it's a show that has a huge fandom and ran for 6 years before it was finally canceled. So this book focuses on our third set of actors from the show. who met before they came to work for the show. They had an incredibly passionate one night stand a few months before they got hired for this show, and she left afterwards without a word or a note or anything, and he was crushed. So imagine her surprise when she shows up for work the first day and finds her one night stand is one of her co-stars. Um, Peter, the male lead, sees this job as his chance to move from being a character actor to being a leading man. And he doesn't want to mess that up for the woman who already walked out on him. So he is determined to keep her at a distance, even though the flame definitely still burns in his heart. And he does successfully keep her at a distance for all 6 years of filming on a remote Irish island. And on the last night of filming, after the show has been canceled, they finally give in to all of that sexual tension and have another incredibly passionate night. But neither of them feel that there is a way forward with this romance or affair or whatever it is. Maria is looking for a long-term husband. She appreciates family, and she intends to go back to her family in Scandinavia. And Peter needs to prove to her that he has what it takes for the long haul. They are well developed, extremely likable characters. The supporting cast is absolutely hilarious, and it is an unputdownable plot. The main characters are both more mature adults, which, as I'm in my 50s, I appreciate. They're also of a more robust size than you usually see on, the cover of grocery store magazines. There are a lot of themes in here regarding body acceptance, standing up for yourself, self-care. So really, this is a fantastic series. And even though this is the third in the series, it works perfectly well as a standalone, and it's a great entrance to the other books. Next slide, please. So Pride and Protest by Nikki Payne. You can't have a talk on romance books without including at least one rewritten classic. And this one is a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice, except it is set in modern day DC, gives you the dual point of views of the female lead, Black local DJ Liza, who is trying to protect her neighborhood of Marytown from gentrification by Pemberley Development, which is headed up by CEO Dorsey, who's Filipino adopted into a white family. So they have basically a meat disaster from their very first day. They are constantly at loggerheads with each other, but they keep bumping into each other at every event. And they find that their fighting is striking other kinds of sparks than they would have expected. But they have a lot to overcome in the way of class and cultural differences before they can find love. So this is, Library Journal describes this as funny, intelligent, and full of heart. And Kirkus calls it a lively, sexy, and fresh take on a beloved classic. So this is a book for which you definitely need to have the tissue box handy. Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan is endorsed by Colleen Hoover. She calls it real, raw, and magnificent, the beautiful angst I love to read. It is kind of an emotional gut punch. The main characters are divorced from each other and have been co-parenting for the last 2 years, after tragedy, actually a miscarriage, drove them apart. Both of them have been in therapy and they keep finding themselves drawn back to each other. But even though the chemistry is still there, they don't know if they have the emotional and mental toughness to get back together again. So there are a lot of ups and downs. They deal with grief, they deal with depression, but the feelings that they have for each other are still strong. And this is an absolutely beautifully written book. This is also the beginning of a series called Skyland. Next slide, please. So here's another series opener from cowboy romance writer A.J. Pine. This is The Murphys of Meadow Valley, and Holding Out for a Cowboy is about the first Murphy, who is a literal beauty school dropout. She's running the family bar, and at the age of 18, she fell in love with a cowboy who broke her heart, and unfortunately, she lost the child that she was carrying from him. Um, he, she has managed to avoid him for all of these years, despite them living in the same small town, until he finally decides it's time for him to leave. He has a fiance who lives several hours away. He's planning to sell his business, marry his fiance, and get out of this town for good. But when he gets to the altar, he finds that his old flame is still in his heart and he can't do it. He walks away from the wedding. And on his way home, he discovers her broken down in a car on her way to a business interview as she's finally trying to get her life back on track. So it's fate that they meet again, and they decide to see if they can get this working again. There are standout supporting characters in all of AJ Pine's series, and Publishers Weekly calls this an endearing second chance romance. Oddly enough, I found a constant theme through this winter and early spring's books is the enemies to lovers trope. People who start out hating each other and wind up together at the end of the book. They do say that the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. And we definitely see that in this book. The main character, Lisette Alonso, winds up on a plane next to her childhood nemesis, Brian, the man who single-handedly ruined every Valentine's Day for her for 10 years in a row, starting in second grade. She is on her way to be maid of honor at her best friend's wedding, and Brian has an obligation to a media event. He's become a well-known but somewhat reclusive fantasy author, and they have made a movie based on his first book. The female lead of the movie starts hitting on him, and that triggers his social anxiety. And meanwhile, Lisette finds out that her cheating ex is also a member of the wedding. So for mutual protection, the two of them decide to fake date. And as one might expect in a romance book, fake dating turns to real loving. Library Journal calls this an escapist read full of laughs and heat. So this is one on my TBR list, X's and O's by Amy Lee. The main character, Tara Chen, is a resident of Romancelandia. She's a nurse by day, but an online blogger by night, writing about her favorite subject, romance novels. However, her love of romances has not stopped her last 10 boyfriends from breaking up with her. And she's decided to um, let the romance tropes lead her life and find her own happily ever after. So she decides that she's going to go for a second chance romance, and in true high fidelity style, goes through all of her former exes to try again and see what went wrong the first time. Assisting her is her roommate, Trevor. Only when he shows up on one of Tara's live streams in the background, her followers instantly start rooting for a relationship with him, or what they call a room-mance. Things start to heat up between the two of them as they discover that perhaps it's not a second chance romance in her future, but a friends to lovers story. PW calls this one sensitive and swoony as it is self-aware, playfully engaging popular romance tropes. This is a winner. So Kate Clayborne's Georgie All Along. We have another woman starting at the end of a job. Georgie loses her high pressure Hollywood job and, feeling at a loss and not quite sure how to move forward with her life, she decides to return to her hometown to recoup and find herself again. She finds her old diary from high school and decides, well, maybe what she needs to start moving forward is a few small successes. So she starts pursuing her high school bucket list, along with the help of her accidental roommate, Levi, who manages to book the same house that she did. So they wind up sharing the house as roommates. Chasing her teenage dreams helps both of them work through their grown-up issues and find adult happiness. This is not a romantic comedy, although the situation does seem to lead in that direction. There are very few laughs. It's more a introspective, insightful novel about character growth. Forward Reviews says deeper ideas form around healing the past to make space for a hopeful present, and calls it realistic and insightful. A gentle tale of two people who set out to find themselves and stumble into love along the way. So, as you can see from the Four Flames, this is a Helen Hart novel. She's starting a new series called Black Rose Underground. And the first book looks at two longtime friends. Mandy has been in love with Jackson for years, but thinks that he has solidly friend zoned her and she will never be able to break out of that bubble into a romantic relationship with him. When in truth, the only reason he hasn't gone after her is that he's afraid that his own kinks are going to scare her off because he's into BDSM. She decides it's time to embrace her inner bad girl, and she signs up for a hookup dating app. When Jackson finds out about this, he's horrified and afraid that she's going to get hurt. So he puts on a bad accent and an even worse disguise and signs up as Mr. Dark and takes her to the Black Rose Underground Club, hoping to scare her off from the lifestyle that she's experimenting with. But Mandy is not only intrigued, she is not at all fooled. She knew it was him all along. And so the rest of the book is the extremely steamy dance of finding out if these longtime friends can grow into something more. And PW writes that Hart does a fine job of balancing heat and emotion as both Mandy and Jackson adjust to their changing relationship. This red hot tale will have readers fanning themselves, which is pretty typical for a Helen Hart novel. We come to my absolute favorite title of all of these. I have to read the book if only to know how it got titled Sorry Bro. This is the Armenian American sapphic rom-com that you never knew you were looking for. The main character is an Armenian American woman who plunges into a rediscovery of her roots when her white boyfriend proposes to her in the worst possible way at a frat party. And she realizes that he never understood her or her family's traditions at all. So, cut loose and single for the first time in a long time, her mom approaches her with a spreadsheet of every single Armenian American man in the city of San Francisco and sends her to the city's Explore Armenia festival to go find them. She decides to take it as an opportunity to reconnect with her roots and maybe check out a few of these guys in the process. Except the first person that she meets is this fascinating, gorgeous woman named Arabuni. So, amidst the cooking classes and traditional dances that they attend together, Nar's wing woman winds up being the person to sweep her off her feet. And suddenly the long hidden bisexuality can no longer be ignored. She has been closeted for a long time, but she's finally found someone who seems to love her for all of herself. And she needs to find the courage to disrupt her family's image as the dutiful straight daughter that she is not, and let them see her true self so that she can find her true love. 12 Months and a Day, I would refer to this as a cathartic romance. There are actually two couples in this book because both of the living members of this entourage are widowed. Both of them lost their partner to cancer, to accident, and they're going through the grieving process alone. Their deceased partners meet each other in the afterlife and decide to team up and try to get their former partners together so that they will not be alone. And PW calls this a bittersweet narrative of loss and love as two ghosts join forces to help those they left behind to overcome their loneliness. In lyrical prose, Young crafts a deeply emotional depiction of two people trying to move on while wrestling with immense sorrow. Meanwhile, the ghostly duo adds levity as they try to make sense of their spectral experience. The result is an impressive and poignant romance. I would also like to give a shout out to the audiobook version of this because it is narrated by the author's daughter and includes original songs sung by her. And speaking of music, Alexis Daria has been on my radar for some time. Take the Lead is actually her debut work, which is getting republished by one of the big publishers. This had originally been self-published. So Take the Lead is the first book in a duology about a reality dance show. And in this one, the female lead is a professional dancer on the show. And after 4 years, she's hoping to break into the finals with her latest partner, who is himself a reality show star of a Alaskan wilderness survival show with his family. The man has moves and they have chemistry, but before they can explore what might be between them, her producer decides that he's going to set them up for a showmance, which is something neither of them want. Basically, a fake romance for show publicity. So they are trapped into the decision to choose their careers and possibly a shot at the trophy, or take a chance on true love and walk away from the show. Kirkus writes, the structure of the competition keeps the pages flying, and Daria does a fantastic job making the thrilling dance routines jump and twirl off the page. Add in the protagonist's opposite personalities and fiery attraction, and this whirlwind romance scores a 10 out of 10. Kylie Scott's end of story is kind of an unusual paranormal romance. Main character Susie Bowen inherits a fixer-upper from her aunt. And when she opens the door to the contractor that she just hired to fix up the place, she discovers that it's her recent ex's best friend. So she's not terribly inclined to invite the enemy into her house, but she needs to get this work done. So they just decide to stay away from each other and get on with it. But things go from awkward to kind of unbelievable when Lars discovers a divorce certificate hidden inside a wall of the house, dated 10 years in the future. And it has both of their names on it. He's at first convinced that she's trying to prank him, but she's just as surprised as he is. So as they try to unravel the mystery of this impossible document, they start to feel a spark between themselves. And suddenly the idea of them being married does not seem that far-fetched. But do they really want to chance a relationship that seems to be doomed from the very beginning? PW writes, Scott nails the pacing and delivers some delightful comedic moments, but it's her masterfully crafted characters that really set this apart. Both Susie and Lars feel like mature, fully realized people who bring their entire selves and past experiences to their relationship. The book's focus on how they sort through their differences elevates it to the next level. This strikingly fresh romance is sure to win fans. So The Neighbor Favor is by debut romance author Christina Forrest, and features a shy bookworm who needs a date for her cousin's wedding and enlists the aid of her charming neighbor to help her, not realizing that this is the man who is an obscure author that she's been corresponding with for the last several years, until he mysteriously ghosted her. So this swoony contemporary romance with fully realized characters will have readers hooked from the front page, and the protagonists, who are Black, have deep, relatable backstories. So that's it for our contemporary romances. We're going to move into the historicals now with How to Win a Wallflower by Samara Parrish. This is book 3 in her Rebels with a Cause series, but it works completely well as a standalone. Oh, wait, no, sorry. This one does not work as a standalone. This does assume some familiarity with the series. So in this case, you might want to start with the first book, which is How to Survive a Scandal. This one, the title is somewhat puzzling, because a wallflower traditionally is a woman at a dance who's unable to find a partner. And so she winds up holding up the wall. In this case, the male lead is the wallflower in question. He's a reclusive expat inventor whose brother has passed away, leaving him a newly minted Viscount, and completely unable to navigate the maelstrom of London society, which he has been away from for so long. On top of everything else, he discovers that he is engaged to his brother's fiancée, and she's a horrible woman, and he wants nothing to do with her. So he enlists the aid of the female lead, who is a social butterfly, well versed with the London whirl. LJ writes, readers will quickly fall into the love story of this extrovert introvert pairing and become emotionally caught up in their personal struggles. A Wicked Game by Kate Bateman is another one that's on my TBR list. This is book 3 in the Ruthless Rivals series, but this one does work as a standalone. The main character has spent the last several years first as a sailor for the British Navy in the Napoleonic Wars, and then captured by the French. So he's been imprisoned for the last several years. He's finally found his way back home, and he has sworn to take revenge on the map maker whose incorrect maps directly led to his shipwreck and capture, only to discover that the R. Crusoe, who made the maps, is in fact the young woman he left behind years ago, who teasingly bet him 3 kisses if he ever made it home alive. And now she is working as a map maker for the British government to misdirect the French. She's taken over from her father, who is no longer able to see well enough to draw his maps. So what started as a childhood rivalry between the two of them evolves into a passionate attraction, and their barbed banter and constant competition prove a delicious prelude to seduction and love. Regency fans will be drawn in by this fast-paced romance and its strong-willed heroine, says Publishers Weekly. Cinderella and the Duke is another one on my TBR list. This has a few elements of the Cinderella trope, namely the lost slipper and the wicked stepmother. The Weatherford Ball is Julia Beaumont's last chance to escape the clutches of her horrid stepmother. Any potential husband will do, rich, poor, even a reasonably well-groomed walrus. But all of Julia's matrimonial chances are dashed thanks to a stolen kiss from an infuriating and utterly rakish Duke. She flees the encounter, leaving only her slipper behind. But she still needs a husband. And the roguish Duke needs protection from the constant barrage of angry husbands who want his blood. So the two of them make a deal, and Julia proposes marriage to him. It is supposed to be a white marriage, a marriage of convenience, but as they say in the worlds of Regency romance, reformed rakes make the best husbands. PW calls this a sparkling take on Cinderella with nuanced lead characters and a fast-paced narrative replete with plenty of sexual tension. Here's another one on my TBR list. Never Cross the Highlander is the first in Lisa Rain's new Shadowlaird series, which features a Highland clan that offers refuge to fugitives from enslavement and others of African descent who swore to honor the clan's laws and contribute productively to clan life. This is one of a growing trend to counteract the wrongful belief that African people did not exist in historical Europe. There were plenty of them. Alexander Dumas is a perfect example. So in this series opener, Callum McNeil is the adopted nephew of the McNeil Laird and a descendant of Africans stolen by pirates from Portuguese slavers. He has become a fierce and respected warrior, and he harbors a dangerous secret. He's part of an underground group that rescues enslaved people and provides passage to freedom. Unfortunately, Rain meets and rescues the wrong person, a young woman who was wrongfully enslaved and is in the middle of trying to break herself out when Callum shows up and kidnaps her. So now she knows his secret, and both of them are in danger. So they have to, despite their initial animosity, rely on each other to get to safety. Um, Never Cross a Highlander is a more serious book, and it does tackle several difficult social issues. So you may want to go into this being aware of that. This is not your standard lighthearted, swoony Highlander fare. So, A Love by Design is the closing book of Elizabeth Everett's delightful Secret Scientists of London series, which is all about independent women in STEM in Regency, England. So, the main character in this case is a female engineer who's trying to establish her own business, but unfortunately keeps running into the Earl who broke her youthful heart and who is still determined to win her back. Um, she winds up working for his political enemy, and he has to use all of his significant charm, good looks, and wit to try to um, talk her out of her own self interest in order to be with him. Um, Even though this is the third in the series, it is an excellent entry point to the series. Other characters from the previous books do show up in this book, but they're not. It's not necessary to know their backstory in order to understand the book. Um, the struggle between the main characters' conflicting dreams and desires creates some excellent tension in the book. Um, there there are very good conversations between them. One finds in romance a lot of the conflict is simply because the main characters are afraid to talk to each other and to admit what they want or what they need. One of the hallmarks of Elizabeth Everett's books is that her characters are forthright and not afraid to speak up for themselves. So this is just a fantastic read. Um, a second chance, friends to enemies to lovers romance that reimagines smashing the patriarchy, says Kirkus. I love the premise of this book. So, One Book Down by Anna Bennett is second in her Rogues to Lovers series. Again, not necessary to read the first book to enjoy the second. Um, a fisherman's daughter who is trying to keep the family business afloat, literally, is out casting her nets and pulls up a half drowned, absolutely gorgeous man in one of them. And he says that he's a duke. So he apparently he's come to this seaside town for rest and relaxation, and someone tried to kill him. And so he wound up in her fishing net and begs for her help when she wants to go to the authorities. He says, no, no, no. He thinks I'm dead. This is the perfect opportunity to find out who's trying to kill me. And so she keeps him in a small shack on the beach, unbeknownst to hopefully everyone else, while they try to work through the mystery of who is trying to kill him. And as they work together, he finds great admiration for her go-getting nature and her quick wit, and one thing leads to another. um, Dashing Duke's forbidden passion and murderous subplots, writes Library Journal. The Duke Gets Even by Joanna Shoup. This is the fourth and last title in her excellent Fifth Avenue Rebel series, which is set in Gilded Age New York. And the main character here is the long-suffering Duke of Lockwood, who finally gets his happily ever after being a secondary character and taking a back seat in the last 3 books in the series, where he's constantly getting jilted. Poor man. So the woman that he winds up with is a free spirit, and this starts out as an affair, a very steamy affair, as you can see, that slowly turns to love. LJ calls this the best entry in the series that ties up what was already an excellent series with a steamy story that showcases well-written characters that readers have come to love. I would recommend starting with the beginning of the series, but I believe this title is accessible even if you haven't read the rest of the series. Artfully Yours by Joanna Lowell is third in her Duke Undone series. This is kind of a loosely connected series. All of the titles in it work as standalones. In this, sparks fly between a lordly art critic and a lady forger. This is Victorian set, and it's a lovely cat and mouse kind of book. The female lead, Nina Finch, became an expert art forger under the tutelage of her brother, who does it for a living. She is simply trying to raise money to start her own business, and she is about to leave the life of crime, which makes her very uncomfortable, when their work comes to the attention of London's greatest art critic, Lord Alan Death. In order to try to throw him off the scent, Nina secures a position as his amanuensis, his secretary, in order to foil his attempt to find the source of the forgeries hanging in his brother's house. As they work together, Lord Alan begins to see that Nina isn't who she seems, but she may also be the one to finally steal his heart. The Secret Lives of Country Gentlemen. K.J. Charles is an absolutely incredible author. She writes queer historical romances that her fans describe as bloody regencies or regencies with a higher body count. This one has been described as Bridgerton meets Poldark, and it's a romance featuring a newly made lord and a family of smugglers. So Charles successfully balances a complicated suspense plot and an emotionally resonant romance. After the untimely death of his father and his inheritance of a baronetcy in Kent, Lord Gareth must confront his path, including a former partner he parted with on bad terms. Joss Doomsday, I love his last name, thought he would never see the man he knew as London ever again after they quarreled the last time they saw each other. When Gareth appears as the heir to the baronetcy in the area, he assumes their paths won't cross until Gareth spots Joss's sister on a nighttime smuggling run and decides to turn her in, something Joss is determined to stop. One thing leads to another, and a rocky reunion becomes a lasting connection as Joss and Gareth reunite and discover more about themselves. there is all kinds of deliciousness in this book. Not only is their relationship incredibly swoony, but there's a rival smuggling gang on the hunt for 10,000 guineas owed them by Garrett's father. Um, this is delightful. However, I will warn you, this is not the traditional Regency. The author does not shy away from the darker aspects of the smuggling business. So yes, there are beatings, there are murders that feature heavily in the plot. But this is definitely worth the read. Wyoming Wild by Sarah M. Eden is kind of part of her Savage Wells series. It takes place in a different town, but some of the side characters from the other books in the series show up in this title. She does build this one as a standalone. So while it's part of that world, it's its own title. Hearts collide when a sheriff's daughter asks a hardened U.S. Marshal to join her fight for justice and rid a small town of her corrupt father. Yes, her father is the corrupt sheriff in question, and she overhears her father plotting to take the marshal's life, and so goes to him to finally take her father down for good. Page-turning historical romance packed with memorable, complex characters, this thoroughly satisfying G-rated romance will have readers on the edge of their seats, says PW. And yes, this is part of the Proper Romance series from Mountain Books. So it is not religiously oriented, and it is completely clean. That is all I have for you. I'm going to turn this over to Brian. These are a few of our upcoming book clubs that are coming up. Slaves in the Family by Edward Ball for He Said, She Said on February 6th. Chapters is reading Louise Erdrich's The Sentence for February 14th, Valentine's Day. Facts is reading Buzz, Sting, Bite for February 15th. Rise and Read, which meets at Atria Senior Living and on Zoom, is reading That Kind of Mother by Ruman Alan on February 23rd. And Investigating Mysteries on February 27th is reading Glenn Eric Hamilton's Past Crimes. That's it for our presentation. Thank you for joining us today.